Guys, with the launch of Act 3, we now have a brand new exotic mission, Encore. Bungie boasted this as their biggest exotic mission yet. And while it may not feel like the most challenging exotic mission, especially after your first clear, all the secrets and puzzles really do add to the amount of content. And also need to question what they mean by the biggest. Because no lie, it is a huge mission in terms of area. As you're traversing through this thing, you'll realize just how big each one of these zones are. Now, with the new exotic mission also comes a new exotic, which we briefly touched on yesterday. We will be doing a deep dive on this exotic, but let me just say it cooks. This isn't some Wish Keeper or Revision Zero, something Bungie's just trying to give us that fits a very niche playstyle. This is a weapon that absolutely melts. Matter of fact, during our damage testing yesterday, we clocked in over 3 million damage. It's disgusting. So disgusting that I'm actually concerned Bungie's gonna do something about it, but hopefully not. Again, deep dive on that exotic here very soon. With that out of the way though, let's talk about how to unlock this weapon, how to obtain the exotic catalyst and the first intrinsic on this weapon, and what the week-to-week progression on this exotic will be. Because yes, this is a craftable exotic. Now to kick things off, we need to pick up the first quest, which is done by completing the seasonal story. And yes guys, that means Act 1 and Act 2. No, you cannot skip it. You need to do them. And personally, I actually really like it. I think the story set up here between Maya Sundaresh and Kiyomi Essie is really good. And I think contextually, doing those previous missions are really important to understand what's happening in this exotic mission. A topic for another video though. With that being said though, to start this off, you'll need to simply talk to Failsafe in order to unlock the mission. You'll also get a quest that asks you to complete it, and you'll find it in the directory at the helm with both regular and expert available. Now, I always recommend doing regular first. For all exotic missions, guys, you want to just do the base version just to become familiar with it, and then you can tackle the expert version. The expert version is going to have to be tackled to get the exotic catalyst. So you launch into the regular version, you'll have some traversal to start off with. You follow the path that we're taking here on the screen, which has you go up to the right and into this hole. Now, this isn't the only way to get here, but we found this to be the fastest way, at least for now, to get to the point we're trying to get to. Also, look for the purple. If you made it to purple, you're in the right spot. And the traversal continues for a while with the path taking you up some lifts and across some chasms. This traversal is fairly similar to that of the Whisper mission. Literally the same leaning walls. Gets pretty trippy here toward the end. But just follow us here on the screen, guys, and you'll get through just fine. Now at the end, you'll see a pod with a green arrow in it. This is the main mechanic throughout this exotic mission. Now, in order to interact with this, we need to get to the first puzzle, which is to our right around this corner. Now here at the first puzzle, we are greeted by the mechanic for this mission. You'll notice more of these pods with green arrows in them, and these pods are essentially toggles that will only be activated by dunking a corresponding green buff inside of them. Now to get this buff, you interact with this pod to your left as you came into this room, where the prompt says retrieve Vex module. Now once you grab that, you'll get a buff at the top of your screen, and you can dunk it on any green pod that doesn't have a buff in it already. Now, you can easily tell what doesn't by these flashing green chevrons on them. Just take that buff and then dunk it on the pod right in front of you. This will materialize a floor with the conflux on top of it. You'll interact with it, and you'll line up one of the 3 Vex nodes that are present on this back wall. Then once you've done interacting with the conflux, continue the process of dunking into green pods by retrieving the buff from the pod that it's dunked in. The next pod you should do is just to the left, where once active, this floor appears and this Vex wall comes down with the conflux behind it. Activate that conflux, retrieve the buff again, and drop to the 3rd pod. This will spawn a floor and then drop another wall when activated. Now inside that wall will actually be a new yellow pod alongside another green pod. Now, the trick here is to get the new yellow buff by killing the Minotaur that spawns right in front of you. Now grabbing this buff and dunking it in the yellow pod will work exactly like the green buff and to spawn the wall right next to it. Now we use this new opening to retrieve your green buff, allowing you to dunk it in that final spot, which will give you access to the final conflux. Now, once you've interacted with that, grab just the green buff and return to the first pod you dunked it inside of. Now, once you dunk it there, the wall with the 3 nodes will despawn, allowing you to progress. Go through that opening all the way to the back, where you find a second green buff. Now you'll pick this up and then hightail it back to the very first pod where you started the puzzle. Now while you're running, a big red wall will be trying to kill you. So you gotta scoot here, fellas. Don't waste any time with the ads. Get past them. You don't need to go crazy, like you don't need a grapple or an Eager's Edge sword, but of course those things do help. But once you've made it to the first pod, you dunk the green buff you have, and then pick up the one that you left in order to get through the back wall, using the extra green buff. And essentially what you're trying to do is return to before this initial puzzle room, where you saw the original pod, and then you're gonna dunk it there to spawn a bridge and continue forward. The idea here, guys, is essentially grabbing these buffs and carrying them back to this initial area. Now this next area is just a bit of traversal, going straight and making your way up the area with the man cannons. You'll then get to a room with a bunch of Vex where you'll need to keep slaying out until a yellow buff drops. Now you'll dunk this in the marked spot to get through the wall and into a lift. Once at the top of the lift, you'll see a new colored pod. This time it's blue, and to get the buff for this, just head to the right where some ads have spawned. Here you just need to grab it off this pedestal. This new buff is for activating portals. Dunk it and the portal to your left will activate. Take this into the next room where you'll be met with a retrievable green buff and a couple more empty blue pots. Now don't pick up the green buff. Instead, wait for the blue buff to spawn in front of it. Once you pick up the blue buff, take it to the pod on the right, which will then activate another portal into the first room. Once in there, you can retrieve the blue buff you had dunked and take it back through the portal where you can dunk it on the main portal at the back of the room. You see where we're going with this, guys? Essentially, you're just finding ways to unlock all of these portals, and sometimes you just have to juggle multiple keys. Now once you've done that, you can now grab the green buff where you can walk through and dunk it to spawn a bridge to another portal. Now at this point, you can go through the active portal and retrieve the second blue buff to activate the final portal on the bridge. Now going through that will take you into a boss fight. This fight also has a rally banner, and it's pretty straightforward. Everything is actually marked on your HUD. The fight is against a subjugator and a tormentor, so definitely have some weapons that can do precision, maybe even microcosm to deal with a subjugator if you wish. But you'll follow the marker into the portals where you're gonna fight them in turn, with them dropping a blue buff each time you hit their health gate, allowing you to progress to the next room. Now once you get them both to their final health bar, you'll fight them at the same time in the main room. And upon defeating them, you'll get some loot, and the portal will take you to the final stretch. Here, you'll just continue forward and you'll clear a couple of rooms with ads, and at the end of this, there will be an active portal which will take you to the exo testing area. Now, you're gonna need to listen to some dialogue before this wall will disappear, which will then allow you to challenge the final boss. I'm just say this dialogue is fantastic. Pay attention. It's creepy. Honestly, if you've watched Prometheus or any of those movies for that fact, and you know who David is, Maya is really giving off major David vibes throughout all of this. The lore is getting juicy, man. Now on to the final boss. You'll have another rally point, and you'll start off by needing to kill the ads and a minotaur that upon killing will drop the green buff, which you can then dunk at the pod right in front of you. Now this pod will spawn a platform with the conflicts on it. Now when you interact with that, the boss will teleport left or right. Once it does that, you'll then retrieve the green buff and then dunk it on the floating platform closest to the boss. When you do this, a large platform will spawn with the capture plate on it. Now you'll capture it to spawn an oracle type object on the boss's shield, and destroying it will allow the boss to be damageable, and it will teleport down towards you. Now once it's here, you unload on the boss, and when you hit the first health threshold, it will put up some non-moving kill walls and then start spawning ads. Now I recommend disregarding all of this and really just baking the boss until it teleports away, which should be somewhere around 10% health. Now once it's gone, you'll need to kill some minotaurs until you get a blue buff, which will allow you to activate the portal behind you and teleport to the beginning platform, therefore bypassing the kill barriers. Now once you're there, you'll deal the final bit of damage to the boss in order to finish the mission. Now when you've successfully done that, you can dunk any of your radiolites, which of course will give you more rewards, but it's the chest here that will give you the exotic Choir of One. This is the first of its kind, a special auto rifle. Now considering that this weapon is a craftable exotic, this means you can go to the Enclave and see the number of intrinsics, barrel perks, mag perks, stocks, and of course, exotic catalysts that you'll be able to obtain and fit it out with. The next part of this guide will be unlocking that first intrinsic, as well as that first catalyst, as that is tied to this week's secret chest. Now to begin doing any of this, there are a few prerequisites than just simply jumping back into the mission. The first is to continue the seasonal story. You'll see this quest that you have right here that will require you to jump into a lost sector to find some boxes. You'll kill some Vex with solar damage. And then you'll need to complete activities and kill Vex bosses. Now for us, we actually did one run through this exotic mission and got that done. Now you could do things like executables, battlegrounds, you can farm lost sectors if you want that have Vex in them. But the exotic mission, no lie, is actually a really easy one and done way to knock out all of these, especially the bosses portion. Now after this, you'll need to kill more Vex, which will end the quest line with you upgrading Failsafe and getting the Exo Prototype 314, which unlocks the Conductor's Imprint codes. This is what's necessary to access the secret puzzles within the mission. Now, I haven't tested this, but I am being told that maybe only one person in the fire team needs to have done this. I personally had not completed that mission, but Sai on my fire team had completed this, which as you see here from the Conductor's Imprint codes, it literally says, unlocks a new hub in the Encore exotic mission. So again, at least from my experience, I only had to have someone on my fire team who had completed NES 007. Now, before we go diving back into the expert version of this mission, you also need to make sure you grab the first exotic catalyst quest from Bungie, which will essentially just have us completing the mission on experts and unlocking a secret chest. Ideally, you're going to be on both of these steps together, guys. That way you can get 2 in 1 when running through this expert version of Encore. Now, a note though is that to do the puzzles and unlock that secret chest, keep in mind you don't have to be on expert, but since we do need to do the mission on expert for the quest, doing both at the same time is the most efficient. Now, as for the combat difficulty, it's not bad. We're not talking like Avalon levels of difficulty. There are a few barrier and overload champions scattered throughout. Void threat is there, but you do have surges. But other things like loadouts, they're not locked, so you could change things up if you need to. There's no time limit or extinguish, so lean into those overcharged weapons, guys, and you'll be just fine. Now to begin, you'll run through the first traversal until you get to the first green pod. Again, the same area that we went through earlier that you saw us when going over the initial portion of this quest. Now in the area just before that, you can actually split to the left where a new room will be waiting. This is what was unlocked by the specimen quest. Inside this room, you'll activate the conflux to spawn 4 cubes just above it. You'll shoot the boxes with a little white indicator below them. And that's the order in which you shoot these cubes, guys. Just literally look at that white indicator below it and shoot them in the order in which that little white indicator moves to. Now, once all 4 are shot, another wave will spawn. This time, it will be above the portals in the room. You'll destroy those and you'll get a secret chest. Now, this one does not count for a quest, but we need this puzzle done to access other puzzles. Now, for the time being, you'll progress through this like normally. The next puzzle, and where we get our first intrinsic upgrade, is found at the first planetary piston, just before the first blue buff section. You'll activate the conflux, and you'll go through the activated portal. This will take us back to the first puzzle room, and we just have to enter the already activated portal. You'll go through that, and you'll end up back at the spawn. Now, here you're going to interact with this conflux, and when we do that, a number of faint lines will shoot out, which we will then need to follow. Now, at the end of each line is a Vex plate that needs to be shot. Now, if you shoot all of them within the time limit, a chest will spawn at the conflux, which will give you some loot and a command frame too. This unlocks the barrel perks on our exotic. Now, once you're done there, you'll then return through the portal and you're going to continue the mission until you reach the place where you interact with the dead Exos. This is where you get the creepy dialogue. Here is going to be the last conflux and portals. Now, going through these will take you to an area with 2 buffs and a bunch of destructible pods just above you. You know, those same pink pods you've seen before in the seasonal activity. The goal here is simple. Dunk the blue buffs to activate a portal. And when you do that, you'll see this white line, which will shoot out above the portal to where it will take you. You'll then use this to teleport up to a pod and destroy it. Now, once you destroy the first one, all but the adjacent pods will become shielded. Essentially, you need to destroy them in the order that they're unshielded by swapping the blue buff to the necessary portal until all of the pods have been destroyed. So I know this may be a bit confusing here, guys. Feel free to trial and error it, but really just following those lines to where you need to go. Now, successfully doing this will spawn another chest, and opening it will satisfy the secret chest portion of our Bungie quest. Now, once you've done this, return and defeat the final boss. And like I said earlier, this boss isn't too difficult. Again, on expert, you probably need to have a pretty decent build, but if you got that, you'll be just fine. I will say you won't shred this boss as quickly as you did in the regular version of this quest, so be prepared to do a few rotations of the mechanics. Now, once you've defeated the boss, you'll then open the chest, which will reward you some more loot, and you'll complete the Bungie quest, which will now give us our first exotic catalyst. Now, that's it. That is week 1 for obtaining the intrinsic upgrade and exotic catalyst for Choir of One. Again, what's going to happen, guys, is every single week, there's going to be another intrinsic to track down, another exotic catalyst to earn, each giving more more unlocks to this exotic here at the Enclave. Now keep in mind, the intrinsics tie into things like the barrel perks, the stonks, the mag perks and stuff. The catalysts are literally just the catalysts themselves. We've got subsistence this week, which is pretty good. We'll talk about that more in our review. Destabilizing rounds, which looks amazing. And then finally, we have onslaughts, which seems insane to have on this weapon, considering the DPS it already puts out. This weapon, already in its current state, is extremely powerful. And what's even crazier is each week after this week, it's only going to get stronger. So again, we'll have guides on all of those intrinsics, as well as those exotic catalysts. We will have a deep dive if you're looking for a deeper understanding of this exotic. But if you're looking for a brief overview of what it can do inside of PvP, also the damage that it could put out in a simple damage phase on a boss, feel free to check out our first initial review of Choir of One. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.